Hello everybody and welcome again to Nerd to the Third Power, your one-stop shop for all things nerdy and awesome. I'm your host, Master of Ceremonies, Dr. Gonzo, and we have got quite the empty studio in here this week. It's like it's
oh my god, we're alone!
Yeah, it's just me and Mike this week. Skyblaze is taking a break for a bit. Those who don't know, she is actually, I believe, a co-chair for Anime St. Louis. Hey guys, Dr. Gonzo here. So apparently because I'm a fucking idiot, I said that it was Skyblaze who's going to be taking a break to work on Anime St. Louis, when it's actually, in fact, Kat who is the co-chair for Anime St. Louis. It would be a hell of a trick for Skyblaze to be the co-chair of a con in St. Louis, Missouri from fucking Sheffield, England. Once again, I'm a fucking moron. We return you to your regularly scheduled program. An anime con in St. Louis, Missouri, hence the name. You know, it's not like you're going to have Anime St. Louis in fucking Oregon. But she's getting pretty busy with that work, so she's taking a break from the show to focus on that. So we're going to miss her very much. We hope that she has a killer con. Killer in that, you know, her and her attendees enjoy it, not that it actually kills her. That would be bad. And Skyblaze is under the weather, so it's just me and you this week, Birdman. It's a guys' night tonight.
Oh boy, we're gonna have so much fun. We're gonna paint our nails and tell ghost stories and have s'mores. It'll be so exciting. And then we'll do each other's hair.
What hair? I've got no hair.
Exactly.
I'm bald as an 8-ball. All right, so it's gonna be kind of just a pretty casual show, just a nice little easy show. Gonna have do some Ask Geek questions, have a nice little fireside chat, and just kind of jaw for a bit, just kind of do something kind of casual. But of course, you know, there is procedure to follow, and we are going to begin this week with the random topic of the week. And early last month, we had a big party for my mother's birthday. It was her 60th birthday. So we had a whole big bash, got, you know, family from all across the country and old friends stuff coming by to visit. And to give you some context about where I fit in with my wider family, me, my mother, and my sister, we're very much the black sheep branch of the family tree. You know, both sides of my family are, you know, rural dwelling, salt of the earth type people, the kind of people who believe that the only screen a child needs in their life is the one on their window. Whereas me, if I go 5 minutes without being able to check Facebook, I just revert to a feral creature who snarls like an animal and attacks passerby for their meat. And I'm talking with a family friend about, you know, how I, you know, just moved into a place of my own, and I'd cataloged my whole collection, and it had come out to a nice little sum of money. And I was looking to buy insurance for my collection. So my aunt, who is like on the total opposite end of the geek spectrum from me, you know, in that she's not a geek like at all, overhears this and is like, "Oh, you know, Gonzo, you don't need to buy insurance for your collection. Don't waste your money on something so silly." And her sister, my mother, fucking rounds on her. And it's like, "Dawn, you need to shut up because you have no idea what you're talking about. That collection is worth more than his car." And and it's kind of funny. It's like, I'm the one who games. My mother's the one setting my aunt straight on like what I need to do to preserve my collection, which I thought was hilarious. So the question that I want to put out to you, Mike, and to you, our listeners, is what is a time that you have had to turn somebody around on your geekdom? Like maybe they thought it was weird or pointless or, you know, something, whatever, but then you set them straight and now they get it. So Mike, I'm sure you've had you've got at least one or two stories of something similar like this.
Nothing as dramatic as, say, where I've got you motherfucker moment, but I'd say one thing recently is my sister-in-law, Kara, was asking what I do with Terrible Warriors, and she was asking, well, what is role-playing? What is it? And I had to explain it to her. I'm like, well, it's interactive storytelling. She's like, well, I don't think I'd like that at all. But you like going to the movies. You like being told stories. So how is that any different? You're just an active participant in it. And she's like, okay, I kind of get it now. And I was like, think of it as like the old bards of old, people who'd gather around, like the village storyteller, and how that became a community
Gather around,
event.
my children, and I'll tell you a tale.
Exactly. So I was like, think of me as a modern day entertainer, like not unlike a bard or a busker, not necessarily where I'm juggling or singing for my supper. Although with the advent of services like Coffee and Patreon, etc., that's becoming a more and more contemporary example of people using storytelling to pay things. So I'm like, it's a different medium for entertainment. And now she kind of gets, she's like, okay. I'm like, so I have to do so much preparation. I have to be able to think on my feet to tell a cohesive storyline. I can't just say, well, I want to kill the bad guy and he dies. And I can't just say, well, there's the adventure, folks. I have to be able to think, okay, you've killed him, but it turns out it was a body double. What do you do now? The bad guy's still alive. So I have to be able to pull shit out of my ass. And she's like, okay, I can respect that. It's an interactive medium that requires a lot more forward thinking than just, I fight the dragon dies. And I thought that was kind of neat. Another thing I've had to turn people around is action figure collecting. For a long time, I collected Star Wars figures. I collected from about 2003 till about 2006. I was in the Revenge of the Sith, the Vintage Trilogy collection, and some miscellaneous exclusives during that time. And my father-in-law, Dave, didn't really get it. And he's like, Mike, how is this stuff worth money? And I remember telling him, much like with your aunt, this is worth more than my education at this current time. And I was like, here's some of the
it's values. Funny, but also sad.
Exactly. It's depressingly sad. And I showed him how much video games are worth and how much this is worth and that's worth. And he's like, okay, now I get it. I'm like, there's a collector's market out there. You say baseball cards, I say Nintendo. You say football jerseys, I say Power Rangers. There's a market for everything, and how much people are willing to pay for it determines its value through eBay sold listings, stuff like that, not just eBay buy it nows. In fact, I've been consulted on several Facebook groups in my local area. Whenever someone says, I want $9,000 for my Nintendo, and I get to be that guy who's like, well, actually, here's what your Nintendo's worth based upon current market trends. Lower your expectations a little bit. One memorable story, I can remember this. It wasn't a Nintendo. It was the weirdest fucking thing. It was Mary Kate and Ashley books. And she had the gall, the ball, the stones, if you will, to ask, well, I want $1,000. And I'm like, where did you come up with this number? So she's like, I looked on eBay. And I'm like, okay, you looked at buy it nows. And then I'm like, okay, how many of these have actually sold? None.
So she's one of those people who, when they say I've done some research, your thought is one Google search, first hit. Okay, continue.
Exactly. And I eventually had to break it down to her. I'm like, okay, let's say you have something valuable here. Are they first editions? Are they in good condition? Do they have any rarities, misprints, or anything that might make them stand out? And eventually, after talking with her for a few hours, she's like, oh man, these aren't worth $1,000. I'm like, no, they're worth maybe at the upper end $100, and that's if you find someone who wants a complete set, not partials of what you have. And she was upset but happy with me. She also asked me to appraise some Harry Potter books because she was convinced she had the first edition of Harry Potter. I'm like, no, you have the first mass printing. You don't have the first edition of the first printing. You don't have the one that was limited to, like, I think 2,500 copies at most. So I'm like, I'm sorry, you don't have a retirement fund. You have a very nice kitsch collection that would make a Harry Potter completionist happy if they're looking specifically for variants.
Well, I had to swing it back to my other talk about me looking for insurance. When I told my dad how much my collection was worth. For reference, my collection, when I finally cataloged, it came out to about $16,000. He was like, okay, my dad's, you know, he's I love him, but he never really sees the forest for the trees. He's always very practicality first. So he's like, okay, well, maybe you should consider getting a safe deposit box to keep your games. And like, why the hell would I do that? I want this collection out so I can display it. And it's like, or are you just gonna have $16,000 in cash sitting out and looking at it? And I'm like, yeah, but we're not talking about, you know, a pile of dollar bills is just gonna sit there inert, you know. this is like, a collection of movies or books. I mean, you got fucking analog magazines dating back to 1966. Are you going to tell me you're going to throw those in the safe deposit box? No, you pull those fuckers off the shelf and you read them. And I was like, okay, all right, yeah, I see your point. So, I want to put the question out to you, the listeners. What is a time that you've had to turn somebody around on your geekdom or some aspect of it that they thought was weird or unusual? So, yeah, sound off in the comments or send us an email, drgonzo@nerdtothethirdpower.com, and yeah, we'll follow up on this topic next week and read some of your responses. And so with that, we are going to move into our next segment of the show, your favorite segment, my favorite segment, Ask a Geek. And Mike, we're starting to get some questions here with your name on it. First one here is from Paul, and he asked you, I've been familiar with your work for years, know that you've done PR for a number of years. What was your favorite PR job?
My favorite PR job was working for a small convention in Ontario, Canada, called Con Bravo. And with that, I was able to get in contact with people like Mark Meir, who played Commander Shepard in the Mass Effect series. I made other contacts there, working with former producers of a site that we no longer mention. But it was getting everybody invited, getting everybody to work together. And it was just a tremendously fun time being able to network and get cool people to come out to this convention, to build a fan convention that was built by fans for fans, to really get a sense of community going. And as a PR person, you thrive on community because you work with community managers, people who work on the street team, social media teams, etc. And being able to get everything to synergize together, to come together, to have 5,000-6,000 people plus come to an event that you helped build is something fantastic. It's seeing my education at work. Other things, doing PR stuff, well, doing it for Twig has definitely proven to be a unique aspect, because now having that insight of PR means, okay, I know where to look for press information, which means if I want to get a free copy of a game, I now know where to go. I'm not just like, please, sir, can I have some more? I know exactly who to contact, what to say, how to schmooze, and basically take advantage of my education to get a lot of free stuff for the show. But that's one of the aspects that I appreciate about having a public relations background. Also, being able to read between the lines of certain PR press releases is fun. Whenever there's a disaster happening in the PR industry, I know exactly what's being said in the back rooms or what's being said in meetings, because there's something in PR called crisis communication, which is exactly what it sounds. When something bad happens, a PR statement comes out, and it's kind of fun to be able to know, I know exactly who freaked out on who and what was likely said in that meeting. So it's kind of fun that way.
Okay, all right, cool. Okay, now I know that in your time with PR, you've also amassed a fair bit of swag. So what's the coolest bit of swag that you've ever gotten from your PR work?
One of the coolest bits of swag is I got flown out to Los Angeles to attend the Spike TV Video Game Awards back in 2009 with Handsome Tom, formerly of the Game Heroes and Screw Attack. Another thing, there is a company called Project Triforce, and they're known for high-end replica statues and other replica weapons. They sent me a $1,000 Gears of War 3 Lancer that was made out of resin. It was 1-to-1 scale. This thing was heavy, and it was worth probably, I think, 900 American, I think, at the time. So if you translate that to Canadian, that's a fair chunk. Multiple collector's editions of games. It's not often that I get something that isn't a collector's edition of a game. A lot of screening passes to go to movies, stuff like that. Like if I want to go see the Avengers Endgame, it's a reasonable possibility that I could go to the Toronto screening if I talk to the right people. But usually it's a lot of advanced product, a lot of advanced movies, stuff like that.
Okay, alrighty, cool. All right, and let's see here. Next question on the list. This is from Erica, and she asked me, as a collector, what do I think of companies like limited run games? I I have kind of mixed feelings about limited run games and their ilk. For those who don't know what I'm talking about, there are companies now that have cropped up in the last couple of years who they will make physical printings of games that are otherwise digital only, and will release them for consoles. Limited Run is one of the is the most well known. There's also, I think, Super Rare Games is another one. And as their name implies, they're distinguished by being very small print runs, which tend to sell out very quickly, and on the secondhand market tend to be very expensive, even just a couple of months after release. For example, I recently purchased a copy of Night Trap for the Nintendo Switch that I found at one of my retro stores that I hit around, and it cost me about $90. Whereas if I had been quick on the draw and gotten it through the website, I'd have just paid, maybe like 40 or so. Mm-hmm. As a collector, I think it's neat to be able to get physical copies of these games to have in my collection, especially because I'm one of those people who's paranoid. Is like, okay, well, if my console ever dies and I have to replace it and the servers go down 10 years now, how am I going to be able to play this game again? So now I know that, until the day I die, I will always be able to play Night Trap on the Nintendo Switch, which is just something that I cannot lead a full and happy life without that ability.
Clearly a milestone moment in your life.
I mean, it's one of those games that you just play by the fireplace with a nice glass of wine. You know what I'm saying?
Chardonnay and Night Trap, of course. It's Thursday.
Oh, please, no. Night Trap is a Chianti game. Shantae, you play with Chardonnay, because you get that nice wordplay. But on the other hand, as a fan, someone who believes that gaming should be open to everybody, it kind of irks me a little bit, because the problem is that the people who are into these limited print run games, they know how small these printings are, and so you'll have people squatting on the pre-orders or on the store pages to snatch up all the copies for them to turn around and sell on the secondary market, which, it's sort of the nature of the beast, but at the same time, I kind of find it a little bit predatory, because like I said, if I'd been able to get that copy of Night Trap off of the limited run website, I'd have only paid maybe $40-50, and here I am paying almost double that at a store. So I kind of have mixed feelings on the subject with regards to it. So like it's a neat little extra thing if you're really an enthusiast into collecting, or there's like a special game that you want to have a physical copy of. Like for example, Limited Run just put out a physical copy of Shantae and the Pirate's Curse for the Switch, which I'm a huge Shantae fan, so it's like I had to have this, and I managed to snatch a pre-order on that. But at the same time, it's like, it's not really something that you can go into a store and just, pick up off the shelf and buy. Or so I thought, because apparently fucking Best Buy, of all places, has got a contract with limited run games. You can actually find limited run printed games in Best Buys now. Did you know about this?
I had no idea. I wonder if that extends to Best Buy Canada, actually.
I didn't know either until a buddy of mine who's also into collecting, he fucking rolled up into my house with Meat Boy and Golf Story that he bought at Best Buy, and they both had the limited run logo on it. So I was like, well, shit, I guess I'm going to start going to Best Buy now.
Distribution, son, get it.
So yeah, so I'm kind of, like I said, I'm kind of iffy on the whole limited run games concept. So it's a neat thing, but at the same time, there are some drawbacks that come with it that I can see.
I'm kind of in the same mindset as you for this. I mean, I see a lot of this in the toy market, especially when it comes to collectible statues. You'll have people who are like, well, it's a limited print run of, say, 5,000. Oh, people will buy a bunch of them and sit on them.
Yeah, I remember the year that you hit me up on Facebook crying your eyes out because you went to BronyCon and you were like behind the last person in line who got the exclusive Derpy Hooves toy that year.
Yeah, and I got fortunate and a fan sent it to me, but I was like, Jesus, like San Diego Comic-Con is the time of year I can't fucking stand when it comes to limited editions, because you will pay double market price at the minimum for stuff. Sometimes you'll get some people that are nice and you'll pay 25%. Like for example, with Power Morphicon, they had a limited edition Lord Draken figure. I saw those going for $200. I got mine at cost. Thank you, Linkara. You are my buddy. But I was so surprised just to see how cutthroat the toy market still is after being out of it for so many years. In fact, I'd argue it's even gotten worse now.
Yeah. Do you think a lot of that might be because so many of these things are now getting into the mainstream as opposed to being like niche like they were 10 or 20 years ago?
I would say so. I mean, as things become more accessible, as you see Geek becoming... Literally, Geek is mainstream now. We're no longer hiding in our parents' basements anymore.
Geek is chic.
Yeah, Geek is cool now, and people want these things. I mean, look at how the Funko market has taken off, and some would say it's starting to crash now. I would argue that point. But people will kill each other for these things. And it's neat how ordinary people are getting into these things, but it's also driving the collector's market up and up and up and up and up. Obviously, there's a premium to pay for what you want, but well, that's the nature of the beast.
Now here's a question I want to throw at you. Did you know that there's actually a market for counterfeit toys?
I did actually. One of the
I stumbled across this completely by accident. Because I don't think I've ever mentioned this on the show, but I'm sure you've seen it on my Facebook. But do you remember that Xenoblade Chronicles 2 Pyra figure that Good Smile put out earlier this year that I was just like totally in love with and had to have?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I wound up snagging a boxed Pyra figure off of eBay, costing like $300. And then I had a buddy of mine roll up a couple weeks later, and he thought he was the hot shit because he got one out of box for like 20. And I was like, really? And he's like, yeah. And so he brought it up to show it to me, to prove it to me, because I guess he thought I didn't trust him. And I'm looking at this figure, and I'm like, dude, I can't believe I'm saying this, but this is a fake. You got scammed, man. And I was like, what? It's a fake? And I was like, yeah. And I was like, how do you know? And I was, because, and I don't want to get too crude with this, but it's the God's honest truth. The people who had made the figure, they didn't really get Pyra's design 100% correct. And let's just say that there was underboob where underboob should not have been. And I was like, you got ripped off, dude.
One of my favorite things is I love looking for knockoff Transformers and knockoff He-Man figures. I'm a big fan of both of those, because sometimes you'll get these molds out of China or out of Mexico, and they look almost like the real thing, but you're like, why is this plastic so brittle? Or why is his face so derpy? And you'll just notice little things like that differentiates it from the authentic G1 or authentic Masters of the Universe to a knockoff. Some of these are fantastic. I love bootleg toys too. One of my favorite, and it's a meme on the internet, is Robert Cop. Not RoboCop, Robert Cop. And I think it says he's the furniture of law enforcement. I think that's what it says on his packaging.
You ever watch a series called The Toys That Made Us?
Yes, love that show.
You ever see the Star Wars episode where they talk about bootleg Star Wars toys, and they're like the Death Star commander, quote unquote, and it's just this figure bent over a calculator?
Yep. Fantastic series. Love that show.
All right. So thank you for the question. Let's see here now. And then here's one. We like to pull these general ones every now and then just to have fun with it. But here's one from Rick, and he just asked, "What you playing?" So let's start with you, Birdman. What's good in your game console today?
Currently I'm playing through the Division 2 from Ubisoft. Definitely one of the better looter shooters I've played in a while. Not heavy on story, but the gunplay feels really nice. The loot feels really nice. The end game, which I'm working towards, looks like it's actually going to be interesting once you complete all the missions, really get into the nitty-gritty of the game. I've got 22 hours into it so far. Some of my other producers are like 48 plus hours into it, and I can't wait to see what's ahead for me, because it's an Ubisoft game, there's always something on the map, which means there's always something to do, but it feels organic. It feels like it grows with you. And I gotta say, I'm playing that. I'm also playing, and allow me to channel the Red Rage here, Power Rangers Battle for the Grid.
I have I was following that pretty intently for a while, despite not being a Power Rangers fan because it looked pretty good. But I have been hearing some really mixed reviews about that one.
All I gotta say is, you motherfuckers. You motherfuckers at Enway. You had a property and you fucked it up. Now, they've got really good people working on doing the balancing. They got, like, Justin Wong and people like that, who's, like, a former Street Fighter champion. The mechanics are there for this game to be good, but holy God, does this game need balancing. Plus, more than 9 characters, like, at launch, that's pretty, or there's only 9 characters right now at launch. That's pretty rough. The arcade endings are less than 140 characters.
Yeah, that was one of the big criticisms that I heard, was that the presentation was very lackluster.
And no voice acting.
Really?
None. You okay, Lord Draken laughs, and it's not even Jason David Frank. It's a bad impersonation. He's like, "Wah-ha-ha-ha," and that's it. It's fucking lame. You're telling me they couldn't get JDF or whoever to come down to the studio for an afternoon? Or hell, you could Skype this shit in. It's... Honestly, if they had Legacy Rangers doing voices, this game would sell better because that would get people drawn in. Now, they say there's post-launch content coming, like the story mode, more characters. But they
is this a fucking Street Fighter V thing again?
Kind of. And there's the Season's Pass, which they have the audacity to ask $20 for, which is the price of the fucking game. And the Collector's Edition only gives you 2 extra skins and the Season's Pass.
Oh, God.
It's lame. Honestly, this game will be worth it if they fix the mechanics and they add more characters down the road. But right now, avoid this thing.
Okay. All right. Well, for me, I've been playing a lot of the Switch. Jesus Christ, this thing has got its hooks in me deep. Right now, the newest game that I'm playing is Yoshi's Crafted World, because I just absolutely love the Yoshi games. I just think they're all just such adorably fun platformer games, and they never fail to bring a smile to my face. And Yoshi's Crafted World is pretty much up to par. The one thing that I'm really kind of disappointed with is that they didn't make as much use of the if you follow the marketing leading up to this game, one of the big features was that you would be able to rotate the stages to look at it from, you'd see like all the done up crafty bits on the front side, but then you could also look at it from behind and see like kind of behind the curtain, as it were. They took that out. It's not, you're not able to make those switches manually anymore. Now the only time that you see the backside of the stage is if you do the Poochie Pup hunts, which I was really disappointed with, because I thought that whole perspective switch would have been a really neat mechanic, and I'm disappointed that they didn't go as whole hog with it as the trailers and stuff leading up to it led me to believe it was going to be. But it's still a really fun game, definitely worth checking out. Of course, Smash Brothers, I'm still like knee deep into that, and Twitter is going like fucking nuts over the fact that it's April and that's when we were supposed to get Joker. There's actually been kind of a lot of the people I thought actually had kind of a minor aneurysm because, Joker was trending today because of, the new DC movie, and the Smash community thought that it was, the DLC release. So, I'm still playing a lot of that. And I've also been working through some backlog. I've been working my way through Xenoblade Chronicles 2, which I have not been this invested in a JRPG story since Final Fantasy VI. I absolutely love this world, and I love its characters. But damn, the combat pisses me off sometimes. Like, the difficulty likes to jump whenever you enter into a new area. So, like, monsters that you're, like, 10 levels above will just, like, wipe the floor with you. So, there are points where it gets kind of grindy. But, I'm absolutely loving it. I'll tell you a game that's really surprised me. Fucking Golf Story. I played that one.
I've heard remarkably good things about that one.
Yeah, because like anyone who knows me will tell you, the only sports game that I have any time for is Punch-Out, and maybe occasionally Tecmo Super Bowl. But then my buddy, who I talked about earlier, he bought this at Best Buy with the limited run release, came up and he showed it to me. I was like, dude, you've got to play this game. And I was like, really? Fucking golf? And he's like, no, you have to play this. You will love it. And it's like it's literally it's a golf RPG. And it's actually really fun to play, and I've become addicted to this game. So that's pretty much what's and of course, you know, I bought the Final Fantasy IV Switch port, which makes now the 5th time that I've bought it because I'm sick in the fucking head. And I gotta say, I'm really impressed by that port. That is a damn good looking port, and it's amazing how well Final Fantasy VII has aged after 22 years. Same cannot be said for the Switch of Final Fantasy IX, which was just a retread of the iOS port, and the less said about that, the better. All right, and let's see. Next question here. Here's a question here from Mark, and he's actually got something that asking about something that you and I were kind of talking about a bit before the show, Mike. And he asks about our thoughts on the Sekiro difficulty controversy. And for those who don't know what that is, Sekiro is a game that came out, I think it was last week or the week before.
Yeah, last week.
Yeah, and it's a Soulsborne game. You know, designed to be challenging, designed to be difficult. But there's been some minor controversy. A bunch of, you know, games outlets decrying the fact that it doesn't have an easy mode, and there have been arguments back and forth about it. Yeah, let's go into this. This is an interesting topic for me to explore because I'm huge into the Soulsborne games. I absolutely love the Dark Souls trilogy, and I've been chipping my way through, well, trying to chip my way through Bloodborne, but that's discussion. That's you know, we'll get into that later on in this topic. So it's interesting for me to kind of explore this topic because I can kind of see both sides of it, but at the same time, it's like, you know, this is the basic gist of it is people are upset that is not an easy mode. So let's just kind of talk about this. So Mike, you've got kind of an interesting perspective. One of the angles that some of these arguments have made is that it would make the game more accessible for disabled gamers, and as someone who's in that camp, I'm interested to get your perspective on this.
Now, I can see both angles of this. I have a friend of mine who is blind, and he's been saying, I can't enjoy your games because I have a visual disability, and that's very much true. And he says, I can't have the argument of get good. And to counter that point, I think there is a Call of Duty player who is completely blind and wipes the floor with professionals. So don't tell me certain things can hold you back, because if you're willing to work hard enough to overcome your disability, I do believe in some cases, not all, because there are some gray areas, that stuff like that can be overcome. However, though, that being said, a Soulsborne game is designed from its inception to be difficult, to challenge the player, to prove not their worth and their mettle, but it's challenging themselves to beat. Like, these games are not impossible to beat. There's guys who can beat the game without being hit the entire series. So it is possible. Is it a superhuman feat? No. It's a very human feat, but the accessibility option, I can see where people are coming from because they want to experience the story of these Soulsborne games. So do I, but I realize I am not the audience for this game. It's unfortunate I don't get a chance to experience this art, but it wasn't meant for me. And I realize art should be for everybody, but art also has audiences too. Now, an easy mode, I say maybe change it from easy to narrative. Maybe change the combat so it's more cinematic, not as difficult, but still gives you the same sense of satisfaction of getting the story out of it. If you had a narrative mode as opposed to an easy, maybe that's something you could use for the accessibility crowd. If that's what they really want out of it, the story mode, okay, I get that. But if you're purposely watering down something, that's where you challenge the artist, and I think that's a problem.
See, I kind of have to chuckle that you're coming from the angle of experiencing this, because at least with the Dark Souls series, there is no story.
See, that
there's a world and there is a lore to it, but maybe only like 5% of it is actually presented to you and made explicit, and then the rest of it is just like you've got to fill in the blanks with your own thoughts and theories. Like, there's a reason why there are whole channels devoted exclusively to trying to puzzle out just what the fuck is going on in the world of Dark Souls. It's just because the story is just that bare bones. Like, I'd almost like when people ask me about like what the story for, say, Dark Souls 1 is, the best comparison I can draw is like, go and read say, a first edition Dungeons and Dragons rulebook. There's probably more actual story in there than there is in Dark Souls 1.
That's depressing, because I totally thought these games had, like, a big deal, and that's why people were wanting to beat them. Or, wow, that kind of sucks.
Well, it's like, the thing is, like, the thing is, what story is there is presented. Because because the way this, at least in Dark Souls 1, the way the story is presented to you, it invites you to speculate and to try and connect those dots on your own. And what story bits are revealed to you is almost none of it is through cutscenes or through exposition, but through like little hints in, say, like the item descriptions. And you've got to kind of puzzle out what's going on for yourself. But as far as, like, you know, a Mass Effect style narrative, there isn't one. But that's kind of neither here nor there. Now, as someone who's real big into the Souls games, like, I can understand why people would be frustrated with the difficulty, particularly in some of the later games in the genre, because the thing about Dark Souls 1 is that it was hard, but it was also fair. Like, Dark Souls 1 truly was balanced on, like, a razor's edge. You could walk into any room in the game and see what the challenge was and how it could be overcome, and puzzle out how to accomplish it. And then it was just simply a matter of, you know, practicing your chosen plan of attack until you got it down and overcame it. Whereas with later games in the series, particularly with Dark Souls 3 and Bloodborne, the difficulty was geared more around escalation. Just, you know, putting more monsters in one room and basically fighting a war of attrition with you, you know, or maybe just, you know, tougher monsters. And then another thing that made Dark Souls 1 distinct from the later games of the series was any character of any build could go through Dark Souls 1 successfully. Like, they're like, go look on YouTube. There are actually people who have played through the entire game with just a wooden club and no armor. They're just running around naked, and they wiped the floor with this game because it was mechanically so balanced that you could do that. Whereas later games in the series, the mechanics tended to skew towards, you know, using dodge rolls and exploiting invulnerability frames. And that is a problem, because now the only character types that are viable are the characters who can make use of that. I'm very much a tank player. I went through Dark Souls 1 with heavy armor and a shield and basically poured all my points into endurance, so I could basically, you know, wait out. Yeah, tank the hits, wait out my opponents, then hit him with a knockout punch. You can't really do that in, say, Dark Souls 3, which basically made the heavy armor category completely fucking useless because it was all built around dodging. And that, I think, is part of a problem that I think some of the newer Soulsborne games have, is they took the wrong lessons from Dark Souls 1. They're focusing more on beefier monsters and more of them, as opposed to balancing out the mechanics so that you can walk into a room, puzzle out your plan of attack, and actually make it happen. And looking from what I'm seeing of Sekiro, because I haven't played the game myself, but I've been watching some Let's Plays, it very much has a balance issue. So I could say, while I'm against the idea of giving it a blanket difficulty drop, it does look like it needs some serious rebalancing of its mechanics. And then going back to the accessibility argument, one of the things that really irritates me about that argument is so many of the people who are making that argument, they're just couching it in, oh, think of the disabled gamers, and basically using it as just a blanket to hide the fact that they're just pissed off they can't get their head around a game. Which that irritates the hell out of me, because if you wind the clock back 10 years to when the Wii was the big thing, and you had a bunch of actual gamers with motor function problems upset that they, you know, couldn't, you know, use the Wii remote with precision, these same people didn't say shit back then. And it's only
I don't
now.
remember a lot of arguments back then. I remember some, but not a lot.
Yeah.
Not as much as it is now. And you've got a very good point, too. I mean, I'm glad companies like Xbox have stepped up and made the adaptive controller and whatnot for people.
Dude, I want one of those. That thing looks so cool. Like,
it does.
I'm not even saying I just want it in my collection. I just want to play with. It looks like just so neat.
Like, I've got a friend of mine who has cerebral palsy, and he plays Grand Theft Auto with one hand. And I'm like, how in the fuck do you do that? And he's really, really good at it. I'm actually really impressed. But yeah, we didn't hear. We're only starting to hear accessibility in gamings now. Like I myself have difficulty because I have to sit in a wheelchair. Not a big deal, but in my particular situation, I have to sit 6 feet back. So seeing things on a big screen that's little tiny text is really friggin' hard. Like I couldn't. God of War from last year, I didn't like the game because I couldn't see what the hell was going on. I couldn't read the subtitles. They were ridiculously small. Now companies like Ubisoft are making huge leaps into accessibility by adding, here's high contrast, here's large fonts, what do you want your subtitle colors to be, etc., etc. All these different little things that make for a great quality of life, that make the game a lot better for me. So I'm really glad that companies like Ubisoft are taking that lead with accessibility. And I know Sekiro also has options for accessibility as well, but just not the difficulty curve. So I think the art needs to stand on its own. Should art be for everybody? Yes. But there has...
Niche things have to be allowed to be niche.
Yeah, niche things have to exist. Like, I don't expect you to go out and enjoy... I'm trying to think of something really weird that I like. Oh, fuck. I don't know.
You're going to be thinking a long time because we're so similar. A lot of the weird shit that I enjoy.
Yeah, like there's... Okay.
Like you'll come back and you'll be like, I don't expect you to go out and enjoy racing pigs. And I'm like, motherfucker, I'm reigning champion 3 years running in my county.
Like, okay, here's something. You enjoy fanfic. I don't. That is for you. That is not for me. Could I enjoy it? Possibly, but I likely won't. So art is for everybody, but you have to find the art that fits you.
Yeah.
I guess that's the argument I'm trying to make.
Yeah, and that's an argument that makes sense. So, but yeah, no, it's definitely interesting to see how accessibility options have grown in the last few years. And there's actually been kind of rumblings in it even long before, like Borderlands 2, and that came out, that had options for a colorblind mode that I thought was a neat little touch. You could actually go into the display settings and you could set like your color blindness level, and it would actually adjust the color and light balance of the game accordingly. So yeah, which I thought that was really neat. I'll tell you an area where this is a big issue of accessibility, and that's in the VR market. Because, like, it goes back to the problem of the Wii Remote and motion control. So many VR games, you have to have like the Oculus Touch controllers or the Vive wands, and it's like or you've got to stand up and be able to move around. And there's some games, there's some gamers who, because of their specific situation, they're not able to do that. And so there's been this kind of push. This is an area of discussion I wish Skyblaze was here for, because she's real big into the VR scene, and so she could expound on this more than I could. Where there's actually a big discussion going on in the VR gaming industry about accessibility for handicapped and disabled gamers.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad we're now having that conversation where we can adapt games for handicapped people. Like I said, I'm very glad for high contrast options, very glad for larger text stuff like that, but also people who can't move around. Once again, the same friend of mine who has the vision problem, he experienced VR for the first time last year or so like that, and he was really, really astounded by it. He's like, because his particular vision problem, he has to sit really, really, really close to things to see it. So having the VR goggles right in his eyes, he could see like a normal person.
Ooh, virtual desktop must be his best friend.
Something like that, yeah. I'm not 100% sure. We haven't spoken quite some time, but still, he was really immersed in that experience, and I thought that was kind of neat, how VR can cross those borders for people with vision problems.
Ask him about that next time, because I'm not sure if it's on the Vive, but certainly on the Oculus app called Virtual Desktop. It's a free app, and what it does is basically projects your desktop onto the VR display, and you can use your mouse and keyboard, and you can actually still run games through it. So I when I tried out, I was playing like Fallout 4 on VR desktop, and like now that you mention that, that's actually something that, like, people with those kind of vision problems could use to play games that you normally would only be able to play on a television, but that they can't really get around that because of their vision problems. That might be something that they might be worth pursuing. Which then now leads into a problem of like the barrier of entry for VR is still way too fucking expensive, but that's a conversation that that sidesteps that whole thing. So, all right, let's see here now. This is turning into an Ask a Geek mailbag episode.
Why the hell not?
Yeah, all right, let's see here now. Another good question here. Let's find one here. Let's see. Okay. Here is one from Ray, R-E-I, and they ask, if you could live in any one sci-fi universe, what would it be?
Mass Effect.
Mass Effect? Okay.
No,
all right.
No question there. I've got full body prosthesis. I've got the ability to have cybernetics, galactic travel. The galaxy's relatively at peace outside of the Reaper thing, so depending on when in the timeline I live, that would be okay. I would also accept another sci-fi universe I'd want to live in. You answer, and then I'll think of a second option.
Well, we've actually gotten this question before, and I think my answer, either Star Trek or Star Wars. Speaking of, we got another question here, and this one is from John, and he asks, Star Trek or the Orville?
I haven't seen a lot of the Orville, so I really can't answer that. I mean, from what I've seen, I really like. But I like Star Trek. I really like Discovery. I thought it started off rough, but second season has been really solid so far. I have 2 episodes to catch up on, but I'm liking what I've seen.
Okay. I haven't seen the new Star Trek because I refuse to pay for another television streaming service. I've already got 3 as it is. And I've only got so much money in my wallet. But I've been catching the Orville on Hulu. I'm absolutely loving it so far. I'm kind of a little disappointed that a lot of the stories that they're telling are kind of retreads of old Star Trek stories. But I'll tell you what, some of the stories that I think that have been really standouts on their own was the social media episode from the first season, where they stumble across a planet where the whole legal and justice system is based around up or down votes. So like if someone gets, everybody has like a little meter that counts their votes, like Twitter almost. Mm-hmm. And if you get so many down votes, you wind up getting lobotomized. Oh. And one of the crew members falls afoul of that. So that was a really good episode. Another one I thought was really good was an episode, I think it was 3 or 4 episodes ago, where the Doctor actually enters into a romantic relationship with Isaac, who's this like robot character. And that was a really neat character examination of those 2 characters. So I thought that was really astoundingly written. Also made the shocking swerve that came a couple episodes later regarding Isaac and his people a lot more heartbreaking. But that's getting into spoiler territory. But I gotta say, I'm really surprised by how much I'm liking the Orville. When I heard that Seth MacFarlane was making a sci-fi television series, I expected Family Guy in space, and that is not at all what it is. Like the marketing leading up to this show's premiere did it absolutely no favors. It is actually a much smarter show than people gave it credit for.
Yeah, that's something I would agree to as well. I've seen maybe 4 episodes, and it was not marketed properly. It's got humor, but they talk like real people would talk, as opposed to Star Trek, which is something that I've always had a problem with Star Trek's dialogue. Whereas the Orville, it feels very real. Like they're like, "Hey, do you want to see something cool?" Or, "Oh man, this looks really fucking dangerous," sort of thing. I don't want to go down there. Whereas in Star Trek, "We must do it, Captain." Like, no. People are going to get scared.
Okay, and let's see. We got time here, I think, for a nice little in-depth question. Ooh, here's one that I think you'll like, Birdman. And this question is from Rick, and he asks, what are our thoughts on the Ghostbusters 3 teaser?
I have tremendous hope for this. It's got the right people behind it. Jason Reitman, I think, is the right person to helm it. I know they've announced the family quote-unquote cast, which I think one of the kids from Stranger Things is in it, as well as Captain Marvel's young version of her is also in it, and some other kid I've never heard of. And since it's connected to the original universe, I think it's going to be very cool. it's going to be weird not seeing Harold Ramis, but with the right screenplay, the right directing, this is going to be awesome. And you know what? I like the Ghostbusters reboot, so I'm cool with this. It's more Ghostbusters and a motorcycle! Asshole of the night. Anyway, moving on. Fucking hate. I hate living on a busy road. Anyway, but yeah, I think the Ghostbusters 3 teaser, it gave us just the right amount of atmosphere, the right amount of excitement. I suspect we'll see a teaser trailer around Comic-Con, or when the Ghostbusters 35th anniversary hits later on this year, there'll be a longer teaser.
Okay. All right.
And it's filming in Calgary, Alberta. Ah!
Oh, so if you play your cards right, you might actually be able to get in as an extra.
Oh my god, that'd be so badass.
All right, and let's see here now. Here's a question from Eric, and he asks me what are my thoughts on the rumors that Nintendo is going to be putting out 2 new Switch models later this year. I think it's a bit early, honestly. I really do.
How many years has the Switch been around for?
Oh God, not even like 2 years at most. Because yeah, last year we did a show on the Switch, which was actually right about this time of year. So yeah, 2 years. So now the rumor that I'm hearing is that what's going to distinguish these models from the base Switch is that one is going to be a higher end, more powerful device for like the enthusiast who wants like the high power, high graphics experience, and that the other is going to be a stripped down version, similar to how the 2DS was a stripped down version of the 3DS. And like, I get the need for like an enthusiast entry level model, but I kind of feel like that the Switch itself, the base Switch, is such a robust device that that Nintendo could get away with just introducing the enthusiast model and then making the base model the entry level product, and maybe cutting the price by like, $50 to $70.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in agreement with you there, because I don't see the need for the lower entry model. Just have the Uber version and make the standard model the entry model now. That makes total sense. Now,
that said, because I've got to think back to the original 2DS and how that was marketed. If you think back to that was marketed as like a kid's version of the console for like little children. Like, it didn't have the hinge clamshell design. It was designed to be very robust, able to take abuse, and it didn't have the 3D option. So it was meant for like younger kids. And as much as I love the Switch, I gotta be honest here. It's not the sturdiest product on the market. The Joy-Cons especially can wear out and break. So I could see maybe if they release the entry level model at a much cheaper price point and market it as like the little kids version of the console, I could kind of get behind that. But as far as the overall market, like I said, the base model itself could very easily serve as an entry level console. So. And then, of course, this in its own weird way just depresses me more for the end of the 3DS, which, like, it's one of probably my favorite handheld ever. The DS and 3DS libraries. I mean, let's just be honest; those consoles carried Nintendo through the Wii U years.
Oh, absolutely! Like, my 3DS has so many titles on it. Nintendo gave me one of the new 3DSs. And I've got so many things downloaded on that sucker. That thing got me through the hospital back in 2017 when I first went in. And all the games I played on that sucker it was a lifesaver, literally. And you're right, that console carried Nintendo until the Switch. And I was a Switch I was a Switch doubter. I didn't think the Switch would be as successful as it is. I am thankfully been proven wrong.
Yeah, so I don't know. I still kind of wish that the 3DS was going on a higher note than it is. Like, I mean, like even the Wii U went out with Breath of the Wild. What's the 3DS going? Kirby's Epic Yarn? Yeah, no, come on, give us one last tentpole release for the 3DS, Nintendo. One last really good one. It deserves it. All right, and that's about all the time that we have for this week. casual this week, just the two of us. So, yeah, thank you as always for tuning in. We will see you next week for what is our discussion topic next week. Take a look here at the schedule.
We're going to talk about cooties and boy things.
Okay. Let's see. All right. My schedule here shows next week, but I don't know. Given the shakeups, we might do a cyberpunk discussion. So what do you know? What we've always done our best flying in the pants, so we don't know what our discussion topic next week is going to be. We just know it's going to be a lot of fun, and we hope to see you there. Thank you as always for tuning in. As always, I'm Dr. Gonzo.
And as Kat asked me to do, I'm Birdman!
We'll see you next week. Taka, play us out.